live.
Good evening. I'm Francine Katzen sitting in for Susie McMahon tonight, and I would like to welcome Lynn Seldon to Susie McMahon's live virtual book club tonight to talk about his latest book, Carolina's Ring. So, welcome, Lynn. We're so glad that you came to talk to us about this book. We have so much to discuss. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about the next half hour or so.
Good, because we have plenty to talk about this book, and I'm just excited to dive into it. So, if you will, let's get into this book and talk about where the idea came from. Give me all the details about this book. Like, how did it start? The ideas, how long it took.
Sure. So Carolina's Ring it's book 2 in what's called the Ring trilogy. So it's the second in a planned trilogy. And the road to Carolina's Ring started about 12 years ago when I met who would become my mentor, Pat Conroy, in Charleston. And we had a great lunch there and talked about our various careers. And at some point, Pat suggested that I should consider writing a book, a coming of age novel about VMI, like he had done for the Citadel with the book, The Lords of Discipline. Mm-hmm. And so for the next 4 years, with Pat's help and a lot of blood, that first novel came out called Virginia's Ring, which was a coming of age novel based at VMI.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So you got a lot of little help from Pat Conroy. You all were friends. You knew him. I think for those of us that never met him are kind of in awe of that because was sort of a larger than life person.
Right.
Would you say that's pretty accurate?
Yeah, it was definitely a blessing in so many different ways, and it developed over the years and came to Beaufort a lot. We now live in Beaufort, and it's largely a result of the time we spent here with Pat, his wife, Cassandra King, who's also a great novelist, and a lot of Pat's Citadel classmates. And so there's just a big influence of Pat on us moving here and that first novel, Virginia's Ring, and then this new novel that came out earlier this year.
I forgot to ask this in the beginning. Is it necessary to read Virginia's Ring before you read this one, or are they kind of standalone?
They're standalone. We're
okay.
asked that a lot. Some people find that it's helpful because a number of characters from Virginia's Ring make appearances in Carolina's Ring, and including a main character named Virginia, which I introduced. So it's been interesting when this book came out earlier this year. It really introduced a lot more people to the books. And so a number of people, dozens of people, have read Carolina's Ring first and then have gone back to Virginia's Ring and said it didn't really matter too much.
Oh, that's good to know, because I have not read Virginia's Ring, which I definitely will go back and read it now.
Great.
I absolutely love this book. I think I read it in 2 days. I could not put it down. I could not wait to find out what happened between Ben, Carolina, and Alf.
Right.
When you started this book, did you start from beginning to end? Did you even know how the ending would be? Did you have any idea how the book would end?
In this case, as with Virginia's Ring, I did. It wasn't a big outline, but I did anticipate how it would end, and it did end up going that way. Pat was still alive when I was outlining the novel and sort of walked him through what I was thinking. And as with Virginia's Ring, he was really helpful with plot development as far as how it could work or not work, which he did with Virginia's Ring in a big way. In fact, it wasn't originally called Virginia's Ring. It had another title, and it was Pat's idea to change it. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So that was his idea to change the name of the
It's a real funny story. It was originally called Of Rats and Rings, which because it was based at VMI and freshmen are called rats, I thought it was a great title, and Pat read the early draft of the book and said, "There's a lot of good stuff in here, but I hate the title. You can't name a novel after a rodent. You just can't name a novel after a rat."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Well, Pat, what about Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men? That was named after a rodent." And he's like, "Seldon, you're no Steinbeck." And so he brought me back to ground zero, and the title Virginia's Ring really worked out well because it really speaks a lot to the book, as it does with Carolina's Ring. As you know, having read it, it sort of has several meanings. In fact, Carolina has several rings, actually.
Yes, you let me back up for a moment. It's my era. I forgot your bio, and I don't want to forget that because that's as important as the book.
No worries.
Graduate of Virginia Military Institute and Army veteran Lynn Seldon is a longtime writer with more than 500 magazine and newspaper credits, including USA Today, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Trailblazer, Airline and Flights, several AAA publications, and dozens more. He is the author and co author of 6 nonfiction books, and his first novel, Virginia's Ring, was hailed by Pat Conroy as a triumphant and a tour de France. Lynn lives in Beaufort, South Carolina, with fellow writer and wife, Seal Seldon. I'm sorry that I missed that. I was so anxious and wanted to get right into talking about the book. I forgot about the most important part.
No problem. And Seal really appreciates you pronouncing her name correctly.
I'm sure she does. I always get my name messed up all the time, and I'm used to it. So I try to make sure I get other people's name.
People typically think I'm the female in the partnership with Lynn.
They do. Okay. And they think, okay, I get that.
Right.
Okay. So I like the way you developed the characters slowly and way you got to know them. And it felt like, to me, when I was reading this book, it felt like I was on the pages with these characters, going through everything they were going through. And, I've heard stories about when kids go off to college, they have a hard time, or they go to the military school. I know it's rough. I just felt like you made it feel very real.
I lived it. They say, write what you know. And so I knew what it was like to go to a military school, the difficult times and the difficult first year. And then I was fortunate enough to have several writing colleagues, who spent time with me at the Citadel. So I could see how the experience was similar. There are a lot of similarities to VMI and how it was different. In fact, the writer I was on with the book club last month, John Worley, is a class of 67 Citadel graduate, same class as Pat. And he was extremely helpful to me with Carolina's Ring and getting the small details right. What you're talking about as far as getting that on the page and making you feel like, you're at the Citadel.
Making it believable.
Right.
So now, when John, obviously you didn't go there, but he was able to give you all those details to make sure that you had everything right and in order. So how do you feel about the way all this came across on the book? I mean, I can sit here and tell you how much I loved it, and it made it feel real. Are you pleased with the way the book turned out?
Very pleased. You asked me earlier of the timing, and that book I had been writing for 5 years. So it took a lot to develop. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And so that was getting the details right. It sometimes to a fault, where I just wanted to make sure that a restaurant that I sent the characters to in Charleston or up in Greenville or in Richmond actually existed back in 2001. Because, sometimes we think all these restaurants in Charleston have been around forever, like slightly north of Broad, where I had my first lunch with Pat. I put the restaurant in the book because I knew they could have gone there back in the year 2000. And I even went so far as to contact the chef who was there at the time to make sure that what they ate would have been on the menu back then versus
You
just
did.
now. Yeah.
That
So,
between 2001 and 2002 was about the time that I ate there for the first time.
oh,
Yeah.
wow. Very cool.
Yeah, that was really fun to see that
Yeah.
see that. And
I
also,
probably had shrimp and grits for the first time there a long time ago.
and then obviously going to Joe's Inn and the Fan, I marked that page. That was pretty cool to see that. I love that. And I thought it was interesting how Ben relocated to Richmond after he got out of college. And I love that because it made me feel like, he was here. I knew him. I don't
Right.
know. It was just a real feeling.
Again, that's sort of right what you know, but Virginia's Ring, a fair amount takes place on Monument Avenue.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I wanted to take one of the characters from Carolina's Ring back there so that he could interact with the characters from Virginia's Ring as well. And that worked out well. It sometimes took some juggling to make sure the dates worked.
Mhm.
At one point, I had someone have a gentleman have a child when he was only 14 years old. And I'm like, that can't work very well. So I had to go back and revisit the timing of things.
Okay. We have a Facebook question. How did Lynn decide on essay topics, war and football, for Ben and Alf? How did you decide on that?
That's a great question.
Isn't that a great question?
So Ben and Alf are twins, and throughout the novel, as in life, twins often think the same, act the same, even though they're apart by miles. I have a niece and nephew who are twins, and they learned that when they were off at college, they would have the same thoughts about things or want the same foods. And so I had the characters do that. And the essays that the reader is asking about, it's basically a couple of passions of mine. It's ironic for a military school graduate to say this, but I would love for there to be no more war. I think it would be an awesome world to live in. Obviously, it's probably a pipe dream. And the other essay was about basically the end of football. I'm not saying I want the end of football because I'm a big fan, but it was a mother whose son was paralyzed in a football game, and so it was about her campaign to make football safer.
I think, and even today, I think we hear more and more about the injuries related to football,
Sure.
and as opposed to maybe when you and I were growing up and going to school or even in college, because it's definitely front and center now.
For
People
sure.
are very concerned about that with their little ones playing football. They're going to other sports. I mean, but you can get injured with other sports as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
And what was your reason for having Carolina go with Alf instead of Ben? Where did that come from?
You know, I think without giving too much of the plot away,
Yeah.
it has a little bit something to do. The way I wrote it, it was because he asked her first. Bottom line, they all grew up together, and he was the one that was the first in saying how he felt about Carolina. The bigger picture for me is that I had the end in mind, which is that the VMI guy gets the girl. And so it had to develop that way. And I always envisioned it out there as that would happen. I just wasn't sure how it could happen.
Oh, okay.
And I've had a number of Citadel graduates tell me that the way the novel evolved, they could tell that it was a VMI grad who had written it instead of a Citadel graduate.
Oh, and see, I wouldn't know that.
Right.
So at this time, I would love it if you'd read a little bit for us. If you have something picked out to read.
Sure, absolutely.
I would love for you to share some of it.
Got it bookmarked with a
Great.
Virginia's Ring
Yes.
thing.
Yes, I love my.
This is the very beginning of the novel. These are the first words I wrote for this book. And to give you a little bit of a backstory, it starts out with a phrase that Pat Conroy started out the Lords of Discipline with. And I was very intentional. Some people, I just saw a post the other day about the 40th anniversary of the Lords of Discipline. Mm-hmm. And one of the posts was from a Citadel graduate, and he said that first 10 words of that novel were the best he'd ever read. And so I start out this novel just like I did with Virginia's Ring, as a riff on Pat's first words in the Lords of Discipline. Here goes. I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs. I don't want to give away too much. My name is Ben, and I wear the ring. My ring holds stories, and so do the rings of several other people in my life, including Carolina's. She has several rings that have many tales as well. I can't remember a time when Carolina wasn't in my life. She was simply always there, long before we earned our various rings in very different ways. Carolina was with my twin brother Alf and me when we played in her big backyard beside our little house just north of Furman University's bucolic campus and just south of downtown Travelers Rest, my hometown. She was with us on hikes up nearby Paris Mountain and out on the mile-high swinging bridge at North Carolina's Grandfather Mountain. And Alf and I were with her as teenagers when we snuck beers below her family's weathered old gray beach house down on Edisto Island. As I remember it, Carolina was everywhere we were, always. Well, almost. So that's basically, that introduces the characters. Thank you. And it introduces the ring. I'm wearing my VMI ring as a major part of the story. In this case, there's Carolina's wedding ring, which comes into play. Alf's Citadel ring, Ben's VMI ring, and where those rings take them in coming years, through the novel.
Great. And then I saw you were talking about John McCain. I've kind of earmarked that a little bit about how he served. And, was some, I've heard people say that, they agree that he was such a great hero. Right. I've also heard some people disagree with that, but sure. I like that you put that in the book. That was kind of.
Yeah. And I think, I should know this right away, but I think it was because I believe he spoke at VMI. Again, it really happened. And so I maybe let politics get a little bit in there, but I'm a proud veteran and really admire those who serve, especially during wartime. I was fortunate enough, and my father and brother as well, to serve, but during times of general peace.
Good. Well, at this time, I would like for you to introduce your author guest, and let's bring her in.
I'm so excited to introduce Nancy Ritter. There she is. And Nancy had a novel like me come out earlier this year, Slack Tide. Got to read early versions of it and loved it from the first paragraph. And it was fun to see it evolve and become a published book and all of the acclaim that's come with it. So I couldn't wait to have Nancy join me on this. And then I think she's going to be with the book club. Was it March, Nancy? Did Susie decide? Was that right?
Right. That's what she said.
Yep.
Okay. Tell us about your book.
Well, it's called Slack Tide.
Great cover.
Thank you. Thank you. It's actually the artist. It's a wraparound cover. So it's a full piece of art. Was a Charleston artist who now lives in Beaufort. So that was kind of fun to have that chosen as the cover.
And your publisher is out of Charleston, right?
Yes. I was published by Evening Post Books, which is a small Charleston publisher. Great people. They were really fun to work with. Yeah.
They did a great job with it. I love the cover, everything about it. I'm very jealous of the painting. I think it really worked out well. So how's it going? Have you been happy with the reception? I know it seems like it. We were at the book launch, which was magical, which, like mine, took place at the Pat Conroy Literary Center.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary book launch. It almost felt out of body because it was so beautiful, and I felt such a communication with the audience. Yeah, I would say it's going fairly well. I mean, this is my first novel, so I'm not exactly sure what the metrics should be in terms of, sales and, those sorts of metrics. But I mean, a shout out to book clubs, because there is no doubt that since my novel was published, and I don't know if you had the same experience, Lynn, but in mid-March, the book clubs that I've been invited to and have been a part of have been absolutely extraordinary. It's just
Right.
been so amazing, because I'm a very avid reader.
Right.
And to get in, crawl into the brains and the hearts of readers of my book. I mean, it's just an incredible feedback loop that I'm loving.
They're some of my favorite events. Seal and I do a lot of different events. We have one on Thursday at Margaritaville, of all places, where we talk about our various books. But I love book clubs because people are passionate. Most times people have read the book, which is great. And we can talk, about it. In fact, aren't we doing the Low Country Book Club convention, a panel on Saturday, right? That has 130 attendees.
Yeah. Did you see that it was sold out? Yeah.
I'm really excited about that. And those are some passionate readers. I've done it before, and it's a lot of fun. So cool. What's next for you? You're working on another novel, right?
I am noodling another novel. I've got some words on the page. I love writing, but plots are difficult for me. So I've got some characters that I'm developing, and I just don't know what I'm going to have them do yet. So
gotcha.
Just waiting for that to happen.
That's fun. Yep.
It's moderately fun, Lynn.
Next for me, and I think I'm going to steal Francine's question, but just in thinking about it, I've been working on the third one, as Nancy knows, called George's Ring, and I hope it doesn't take me another 5 years to get that one out. I've sort of promised the publisher of Carolina's Ring that he'll have it a lot sooner than this one.
So, good. We're all waiting.
I think I posted on the book club's website about, you were asking me about how long Carolina's Ring took and that kind of thing. And I think one tidbit that a lot of people have enjoyed learning is that most of it was written in Pat's office here in Beaufort. During COVID, Pat's wife was kind enough to bless me with the opportunity to go to Pat's office every day to work on Carolina's Ring, or basically just to procrastinate working on Carolina's Ring, because there are more than 5,000 books in his office. So it's phenomenal to be encircled by all of these books that, Pat had read, with an incredible view, low country view. So it was very inspiring, but sometimes challenging at the same time. So that was a great experience. And I'm now going back there and working on a book about Pat's travels, called Travels with Conroy.
So do you have a date when that's going to come out?
He was very passionate about travel. So it's been fun to look at old airline tickets with Piedmont Airlines and just all kinds of things. I think I can't remember, I posted it on the Facebook page, but he has these phenomenal letters, like from Barbara Streisand, and I remembered one, or Pat's wife remembered one from Jimmy Buffett. And so they found that and posted it about Jimmy wrote a song called The Prince of Tides that was sort of a riff on Pat's book.
Yeah,
so it's pretty cool.
Saw that do you have any idea when that might be out?
The Travels with Conroy?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like it to be out sooner than George's Ring because I think it's more timely. There's going to be great biography on Pat that we all hope is out soon-ish. But it's going to be the most comprehensive book about Pat ever written. And I'd like to have the Travels with Conroy, which is just a very small part of his, the big picture, out sometime after that, just because there will be a lot of chatter. But it's been fun. I've, revisiting Pat's favorite haunts in Rome, Atlanta, San Francisco, here in Beaufort. There's a record of so much that he did and loved. Ironically, it mostly involves around food. He just loved food. And
He was a foodie.
yeah, he really was. He was a foodie before that was a word. Yeah.
Lynn, I had a question. Between your first book and your second book, and I don't know how to articulate this. So have there been any surprises to you with this second book that you didn't experience in your first book? Anything that's been new or startled you or intrigued you that you didn't experience?
That's a great question. I would say the most enjoyable part of it, and this was after it was published, has been that it opened up a whole new audience for Virginia's Ring. That was published in 2014, I think. And I just thought by then anyone who had an interest in it would have heard about it or read it, but it just wasn't the case at all. It's a big world out there. And so it's been fun hearing from people that learned about Virginia's Ring through Carolina's Ring, which has been a real blessing for me. In between the two books, Seal and I wrote 2 travel books.
Right.
And one was about Charleston and one was about Savannah. And that also really, what's the right word, cemented our low country sort of roots and our low country, I guess, expertise maybe. And so I think now that when we go to events like this one at Margaritaville on Thursday, it's fun. We have no idea which book is going to interest which person, but we sort of have something for everyone now.
Right.
Good question.
Nancy, I would like to ask you a little bit of another question about your book. If you could just give us a little bit of details about what your book is about, just a little elevator pitch, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful cover, by the way.
Thank you very much. My book is about a woman who moves to Beaufort without knowing a soul in town, and on her first day in town, her dog disappears. So the book takes place over a very short period of time, I think 9 or 10 days, and follows her in her search for the dog. The dog part is a minor part of the book, and in my mind as the author, it's about community building. And the one thing that I really wanted to do in this book, my last gig was at the Department of Justice, and I did a lot of, it was a great job, the best job I ever had. But I did a lot of work on our country's missing persons crisis. And I traveled all over the country, met with the parents, the moms, the dads of missing kids. I met with the children of missing adults. And one thing over this period of time that I really saw that intrigued me, one thing that made their grief very different than the grieving that people normally experience when they lose someone they love, is the not knowing what happened to the person that they love. And so when this idea for the book came to me through a couple who came in to visit at the Pat Conroy Center where I was doceting, who told me their story, I thought that this would be a perfect avenue for talking about this concept of ambiguous loss. Right. So it's the idea that you don't know. It's kind of about closure, I guess, although I don't like that word, but it's how you grieve when you know that you may never know the answer to something.
Right.
So that's the thing that intrigued me.
Agreed. And you did it well. You really did. It's about closure, but also the possible lack of closure.
Right.
It really is. And
Completely.
and there's a dog in your life, right? Is Otis somewhere there?
Yeah, he's sleeping on the couch. I don't know if I could.
Hi,
He's
Otis.
living his best life.
I first met Otis and Nancy, or Nancy and Otis, at the Pat Conway Literary Center because they were both docents there. And Otis played a major role in jumping up on people's laps and literally healing people. Many people come to the Pat Conway Literary Center with a story that's sometimes not good, but quite often people come there because Pat's writing saved their lives. And Otis somehow knows that that's happening and jumps on their lap and just sits there.
Yeah, that's been a pretty extraordinary experience to be a part of course, I don't know if we're really a part of the healing, but there have been any number, particularly I would say of middle-aged men, who a number of them have come in by themselves, very emotional, having experienced abuse as a kid. And so they resonate so much with Pat's writing.
Right.
And many of them, of course, don't want to tell me about what happened, but there have been any number of times that I'll be leading a tour and I see somebody in a rocking chair with Otis on his lap and almost talking to Otis, kind of having that therapeutic value. So yeah, that's been an extraordinary experience.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
That's our way of plugging the Pat Conroy Literary Center for those who haven't been to Beaufort. It's a pretty amazing place. Moved into new digs, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago now. This is the final place for the Pat Conroy Literary Center. It's truly a special place to visit and to be a part of, for sure.
I agree. I got to visit in March of 2022.
Yay.
Did not get to come this year, unfortunately, because I was sick, but it is a special place, and I can't wait to go back again.
Also, you were on Susie's tour.
Yes, in 2022. Yes.
We did this year. I'm sorry you missed it. We did a really fun culinary walking tour for Susie, and it was a hoot. We would read excerpts from Pat's cookbook, and had all kinds of great low country cuisine, and we really enjoyed it. I think we enjoyed it as much as all the participants, and just walked around town and ate a lot of good food.
I have to say that was the one thing that I think I was like dying. I was missing out on that because I love to cook and bake. I bought his cookbooks and I was like, oh my gosh.
Come visit anytime and Seal and I will give you a private tour.
That sounds awesome because I definitely want to come back. That is definitely on my to-do list very, very soon.
Cool.
I want to follow up with some questions. I want to start with you, Lynn, first. What are you reading now? What have you read? What are you reading? What do you like to read when you're not writing?
I have a different book for almost every room in the house. And it's sort of a mood-based thing. And so I read something in the bedroom that's completely different from the living room. I do have a new Ron Rash that's queued up. I'm very excited about that. George's Ring is going to start out in Jekyll Island, Georgia. And so I'm currently I'm reading 2 novels and a nonfiction book based on in Jekyll Island. And it's about a period there called the Millionaires Club, where a whole bunch of millionaires from the Northeast, J.P. Morgan, Pulitzer, many others, retired to Jekyll Island for 3 months every winter and built this incredible club there called the Jekyll Island Club, which you can now stay in, which is pretty cool. So I'm doing a lot of reading to again get my facts right on that period to make sure that Georgia, the character, is true to life. So
Great. Well,
I have books in 3 rooms on Jekyll Island alone.
oh my goodness, you're busy.
Yeah.
How about you, Nancy? What are you reading? What do you like to read when you're not writing and busy?
I right now am reading a fantastic book. James McBride's latest. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He won the National Book Award for The Good Lord Bird. And the book, his most recently published one, is called The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store.
Right.
And have you read it, Lynn?
No, I was trying to remember the title because I love it.
Yeah. He's an incredible writer, amazing storyteller. And I just got back a couple of weeks ago. Lynn knows that I did this, but I went to the North Carolina mountains, my dog, and I was alone for a month. So I just kind of wanted to experience solitude and being very removed from society. And so whenever I could get a signal, I didn't have TV or radio, no internet, but whenever I could get a phone signal, I would Google James McBride and watch his videos. He's an extraordinary speaker. A lot of authors are not, but he's just so fun to watch. He's a jazz musician. So that's what I'm reading. I'm really enjoying that. It's making me very humble because I'm not the kind of storyteller that he is. But
I hear you. I have that problem a lot. Whenever I would read a writer like Conroy or Ron Rash, I'm like, why bother? They're so good, but it's not a competition. Pat was always saying that. He was always lifting up everyone else. We called him a book blurb whore because he would give every writer a book blurb. And I swear that his blurb for Virginia's Ring sold more books than any word inside. So, yeah. Francine, do I have time to really quickly plug Pat's 2001 commencement speech?
Absolutely, you
because
do.
we talked about that before.
Yes.
So
please do.
Lords of Discipline came out 40 years ago, and Pat was basically banned from the Citadel for decades. He came back in 2001 and spoke to the class of 2001 at their graduation. Bottom line is just Google it. 2001 Citadel commencement, Pat Conroy. It is one of the most moving commencement speeches you'll ever see. I know Susie mentioned she was, I guess, reading it, or maybe you, Francine, were reading it because I repeated the whole thing in Carolina's Ring. It's phenomenal. It foretold a lot about various things in Pat's life, the life of the Citadel. When Pat died, during the commencement speech, he invited the class of 2001 to come to his funeral, and they did in large numbers here in Beaufort. We were there, and it was a pretty special thing where they all wore the ring. And just Google it, and I think it's on YouTube, and it's worth every minute to watch it. It's pretty special.
Yeah, Susie was talking about reading it and crying. Right. I did the same thing because I was like, yeah. So, yeah, it was pretty. So one quick question to Nancy about this month of solitude that I'm intrigued by. Did you come back rested and refreshed? I mean, did you come back a new person? You did.
Sort of, I did. Yeah. One of my goals was to just see whatever came into my heart and my head, and then just follow that through. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of Buddhist reading and thinking, and but what I tend to do, and I think what we all tend to do, is we know how to distract ourselves. So, if you have a moment where nothing is happening, the tendency is to pick up your phone or put on some music or do something that kind of takes you away from wherever your heart and brain are going to go. So I wanted to experiment with that. And I was very lonely the first week. In fact, I was like begging Lynn and Seal to come rescue me.
We were like up in the Great Lakes. We were a long way away.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, I worked through that, which was just fantastic. I don't know, Francine. I would recommend it to anyone. A month is a long time. And I've sort of worked up to that period of time, but solitude and isolation can be a pretty enlightening thing.
Well, I
You were
think
also,
just
you were joined by at least one bear.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That
did a
would
lot
do it
of
for me.
practicing. Yeah. I had Otis with me, and
Yeah.
I really wasn't too prepared to encounter a bear. So when I could get a signal, I Googled, what do you do when you're walking a dog with a bear when a bear appears? The first thing is always keep the dog on a leash, because if the dog's not on a leash, it's going to go investigate the bear. The bear will probably swipe at the dog, which brings the dog back to you. And when the dog comes back to you, the bear comes to you.
Yes.
So
Bigger lunch.
yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. I think we all could use a little solitude. I try to get some myself, but I love people and I love talking to people. So it's hard to get quiet time when you like to.
Well, and hence reading, don't you think, Francine?
Yeah, I read all the time. I have a book. I'm reading a book at all times, and I also have one on Audible. So I have two books going all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's how I get through them. But Lynn, I absolutely love this one. I'm
Thank you so
going
much.
tonight and order Virginia's Ring. I have to read that next. Nancy, I'm getting yours too.
Thank you.
And Lynn, thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you for introducing us to Nancy. Nancy, I can't wait to have you back and follow you both. Nancy, are you on Facebook, Instagram? How can readers follow you?
Facebook, I don't do a lot of posting, but yeah, you can certainly contact me that way. Yeah.
Okay. And Lynn, I know you're on Facebook. For all the readers interested in you, you're on Facebook and you're pretty active. So,
yeah.
And I'm pretty active too, because I love supporting authors, and I'd rather be posting about you all than about myself. So there's that.
Go.
So people are always saying, how do you read so many books? I said, well, I don't watch TV. So there's that. But thank you both tonight. It was fabulous chat, and can't wait to have you all back. And thank you again.
Thanks so much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks.